Two hammers, two bets, and of course, let's not forget the colorful collection of crazy people. I was just 30 minutes ago reading through comments on my last video, and a gentleman said, "Hi, Paul, I have a question, and it's not at all related to this video." But his question was one that I've heard a number of times. And I thought, you know what, it's probably time I address this because I do receive a lot of inquiries about it. And I can fully appreciate and understand the mystery of how do you deal with paying taxes in America to the IRS when you're living here overseas? Kind of like what's the ins or the outs? Well, to make it short and sweet as possible for you, it's not that much different than it is living in the States. Back in the day when I first started working, there was no internet, there was no computers, there was no electronic filing stuff. Everything was done by paper and mail. And so when I first started working, and I imagine a lot of this would apply to you also, I started off low-level jobs, kid out of school, and make a minimum wage, but I would get my W-2 and I was required to file my taxes. And I always anticipated filing my taxes back then because I knew I was going to get a refund because I made so little money. And what I paid in, I always got it all back, or most of it. Then as life progressed and income increased, that changed along with the income. So I would say the most complicated back home that my taxes ever got was when I was at my highest earning peak potential, and I had write-offs. I had a wife, I had kids, I owned a home, there was a mortgage, the usual suspects. So I would try to do my own taxes, but the short form wasn't cutting it anymore. And I knew I wasn't qualified to figure out all the deductions and what forms to use. So, like I imagine you do, you hire someone to do it for you. You can use TurboTax and all that kind of software, great. But a lot of us aren't equipped to do that, so we have someone do it for us, a tax preparer. You pay them $200 or $300 and they do it, and that's that. And they would mail it in for me. And then along came the computer, and along came all the electronic stuff, and that took a lot of the burden out of it for me living over here overseas and for other guys. So to be quite frank with you, I can't make this very complicated because it's not. I just do everything electronically. There are some interesting things that I learned along the trail here as I walked down it. When I first moved here, I was simply receiving Social Security. And when tax time came around, I went on the little website that I always used. I think it was called Easy Tax Return. And it was from the IRS directly. And I went to fill in I got my statement electronically from Social Security. Here's your Social Security statement. I printed it out and I went to go do my taxes and it wouldn't accept it. It was not working. There was nowhere to put anything. And I got confused. And so I called a friend, Tim, who lives out here, and he was an IRS agent for a long, long time. And I said, "Tim, I'm trying to do my taxes." And he says, "On what?" And I said, "My Social Security." He says, "Paul, you don't even have to file. If you're just getting Social Security, you don't even have to file a return," which really kind of took me aback because I thought you were in big trouble if you didn't file a tax return, even if you didn't have anything to claim. I thought it was mandatory. And he said, "No, sir. When you're just receiving Social Security, don't even hassle with it." So that's exactly what I did for 2 years, 3 years. I didn't have any external income. Now, when I started the YouTube channel, I worked it for a year before I even received any money. And then I got a 1099 from Google. And so I went right back to the old short form, but I did it online. And I took my Social Security statement and put that into the computer. And then I took my income from Google and stuck that in the computer on the appropriate line. I didn't have any fancy write-offs or deductions or anything like that. And I took the standard deduction, which was me. And my first year on YouTube, I owed the IRS, are you ready? Whopping $79. So, boom. It was linked to my bank account. The IRS already knew who I was because that's how I had it set up before I came out here. And boom, they got their 79 bucks and we're all still friends. And then the next year came along. The income from YouTube came a little bit bigger. I think I did the same thing. I didn't have any write-offs. I just put all the numbers in there and I owed them $1,800 and so on and so forth. One question that guys have, and I certainly had, was, do I owe taxes to the Philippines? And so I researched that, and there is what's called a reciprocal tax agreement between the Philippines and the United States. So if I'm paying taxes to the United States, I don't have to pay any taxes to the Philippines. My wife, even though she receives income here in the Philippines, and a lot of it is from American viewers, she doesn't owe America any money. She goes once a year and files with what's called the BIR and pays her taxes. BIR is the Philippines version of the IRS. So I hope this answers your question, viewer, and yours too. Now, obviously, if you're more complicated than me, which is pretty easy to be, I'm a fairly simple man, you might have stock dividends, you might have rental income, you might have all these fancy schmancy write-offs and stuff like that, depreciating assets. I don't have any of that stuff, although it will change this year. I found out that since I married May, I get to write her off as a spouse. And that became a shocker to my system. And I found that out totally by accident because a month ago or so, I was having coffee with a subscriber, wanted to meet up and hang out for a while. And guess where he worked? The IRS for 7 years. And he told me, he says, you're married to May, you can write her off. And I said, no way. I thought she had to have a social security number before I could use her as a deduction. Never occurred to me. And he says, nope, she has to have, I think it's a TIN number. Well, she's got a TIN number, but there's some sort of number that I get for her. And then this year, I get to throw her butt on there and write her off too. So there's a little benefit there. So I guess the short answer to this guy's question, and possibly yours, is I simply file and do my taxes online. If I needed an accountant, if I needed a bookkeeper, if I needed a CPA, they're online. There are people out here in the Philippines. I met one for lunch a couple months ago, and he lives in Iloilo, and he just set up shop to do just that, taxes for foreigners or for expats. And he does it all online. I would promote him if I could remember his name and number, but I can't. But anyway, so there are brick and mortar buildings out here in the Philippines that you can Google and find, or wherever country you're living in. And again, you can always contact, if you're comfortable with Bob, the CPA that you use back home, just call old Bob up and say, hey man, can I scan you all this stuff? My dividends and my rental income and my 1099s and my W-2s and all that happy stuff. The one thing that I want to clarify is that I'm only talking about a federal tax return. My residence is Nevada, so there is no state income tax in Nevada. In fact, when I moved from California to Nevada, I got a 10% raise right off the bat because I was getting 10% more money or 10% less taken out of my check once I made that move. But that's another conversation. So if you live in a state that's got state income tax, I just want to be very clear. I don't know anything about that. All I know is what I know and what I do. you may want to consult somebody. It's always pretty easy just to go on Google and say, how do I pay? Do I owe state income taxes? Blah, blah, blah. You get the drift. All right, I wanted to keep this video short and sweet, much to everyone's relief. I hope it answers your questions. I hope it answers my subscriber or viewer's question. And I will see you guys in my next little goofy video. All right, bye.